Turn the music off now. I said now.
Officer, I'm not breaking the law. You don't get to invent one.
You don't argue with me. Stand up and show ID.
Am I being arrested, or are you just uncomfortable with a black woman who knows her rights?
That's your last warning.
Then understand this. Whatever you do next...
The body camera footage would later become the centerpiece of a federal civil rights curriculum, a digital testament to a career-ending mistake that unfolded in high definition. But on that bright, crisp Sunday afternoon in October, Officer Kyle Miller had absolutely no idea that the woman sitting on the park bench, quietly reading a hardcover book, was the United States Assistant Attorney for the Criminal Division. He didn't know that Eleanor Vance had spent the last 25 years putting away domestic terrorists, dismantling racketeering rings, and sending corrupt politicians to federal prison. All Officer Miller saw was a black woman in a public park and a chance to assert his authority. Before we get into the details of this infuriating encounter, I need you to take a second and check something. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Are you comfortable? Now imagine if that peace was shattered by someone with a badge and a gun who decided you didn't belong there. If you believe that law enforcement needs to be held to a higher standard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. We are building a community here that values truth and accountability, and you don't want to miss what we cover next. It was 2:00 p.m. at Greenbrier Park. The autumn leaves were turning shades of russet and gold, and the air had that perfect crispness that brings people out of their homes. Eleanor Vance, 54 years old, was enjoying a rare day off. She was dressed in a thick wool cardigan and comfortable slacks, sitting with perfect posture on a bench overlooking the duck pond. Next to her, a small high-end Bluetooth speaker sat on the wood slats playing a jazz compilation. The volume was low, barely a murmur. You had to be within 5 feet of the bench to distinguish the saxophone from the wind in the trees. It was background noise for her reading a little Coltrane to accompany a historical biography. Officer Kyle Miller was 29 years old. He had been on the force for 4 years, and he had already developed a reputation in the precinct, though not the kind you want. He was known for being proactive, a code word often used for officers who went looking for trouble where there was none. He was patrolling the park on foot, his thumbs hooked into his duty belt, scanning for violations. When he saw Eleanor, his pace slowed. He watched her for a moment. She didn't look up. She turned a page of her book. The lack of acknowledgement seemed to irritate him. He changed his trajectory, stepping off the paved path and walking across the grass directly toward her bench. Eleanor noticed the shadow falling across her page before she saw the officer. She marked her place with a leather bookmark and looked up, sliding her reading glasses down her nose. She expected a polite greeting, perhaps a nod. That is not what she received. "Ma'am, you need to turn that music off," Miller said. It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with a flat, bored affect. Eleanor looked at the small speaker, then back at the officer. She assessed him instantly, the stance, the hand resting near the taser, the aggressive invasion of her personal space. She had cross-examined men like him 100 times. "Excuse me, officer," she asked, her voice calm, cultivated, and steady. "The music," Miller said, pointing a gloved finger at the speaker. "It's a disturbance. Turn it off or I'll write you a citation." Eleanor didn't reach for the speaker. She didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands over her book. "Officer, this is a public park. The municipal code, specifically Section 14B, allows for amplified sound as long as it does not exceed 60 decibels at a distance of 50 feet. This speaker is barely audible at 10 feet. I am not violating any ordinance." Miller blinked. He wasn't used to people citing municipal codes. He was used to people apologizing, scrambling to comply, or getting angry. Resistance in his mind was defiance, and defiance was something he had been trained to crush. "I'm not going to argue the law with you, ma'am," Miller said, stepping closer. "I'm telling you it's too loud. It's disturbing the peace. Now turn it off." "I will not," Eleanor said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "I am enjoying my Sunday afternoon in full compliance with the law. If you feel there is a violation, you are welcome to use a decibel meter to verify it. But I'm not going to turn off my music simply because you demand it." Miller's face flushed. The calm refusal was more insulting to him than if she had screamed. "Okay," he said, pulling his radio off his shoulder but not keying it yet. "If you want to play games, we can play games. I need to see your identification." Eleanor sighed. It was a sigh of deep, weary disappointment. She knew exactly where this was going. She knew the case law, the precedents, and the tragic history of stops just like this one. "Officer, am I under arrest?" "You're being detained for an investigation into a noise ordinance violation," Miller snapped. "ID. Now." "I am not required to provide identification unless I am being arrested for a crime or there is reasonable suspicion that I have committed a crime," Eleanor stated. "A noise ordinance violation is a civil infraction, not a criminal offense, and you have not established that a violation has even occurred. Therefore, under Hybel v. 6th Judicial District Court, I am under no obligation to identify myself." The air between them seemed to crackle. Miller was now fully committed. He couldn't walk away. His ego wouldn't let him. A crowd was beginning to form, mostly other middle-aged adults walking their dogs or pushing strollers, and they had stopped to watch. Miller felt their eyes on him. He felt the need to dominate the situation. "You are obstructing an investigation," Miller said, his voice rising. "That is a criminal offense. Now I'm giving you a lawful order. Stand up and provide your identification." "I am not obstructing anything," Eleanor replied, remaining seated. "I am asserting my Fourth Amendment rights, and I am asking you for your own sake to reconsider your next action. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo." "Last warning," Miller said, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "Officer," Eleanor said, her voice turning steel hard, "I am giving you an opportunity to call your supervisor. Right now, before you touch me. Because if you put your hands on me without probable cause, you are going to violate federal civil rights law, and I assure you the consequences will be severe." Miller laughed. It was a short, nervous sound. "I don't need a supervisor to handle a noise complaint," he said. "Stand up. You're under arrest." "For what?" Eleanor asked. "Disorderly conduct and failure to obey a lawful order," Miller said. He moved in, grabbing Eleanor's left arm and jerking her upward. The book fell from her lap, landing in the grass. The bookmark fluttered away. The jazz music continued to play softly, a surreal soundtrack to the violence of the moment. "I am not resisting," Eleanor said, clearly, loud enough for the gathering witnesses to hear. "I am complying under duress. I want the witnesses to note that I am offering no physical resistance." "Turn around," Miller barked, twisting her arm behind her back with unnecessary force. Eleanor winced as her shoulder joint was manipulated, but she didn't cry out. She turned, allowing Miller to pull her wrists together. The cold steel of the handcuffs clicked tight against her skin. She could feel the metal biting into her wrists. She had sent hundreds of people to prison, but she had never felt the cuffs herself. It was a sensation of profound helplessness, immediately followed by a surge of cold, focused fury. "You're making a scene," Miller muttered in her ear as he double-locked the cuffs. "I'm not the one making the scene, officer," Eleanor replied. By now, at least 5 people had their phones out. A man in a jogging suit stepped forward, holding his phone steady. "Hey, officer, she wasn't doing anything. We could barely hear that music." "Back up," Miller shouted at the bystander. "Back away or you're next." Eleanor looked directly at the man filming. "Sir, please keep recording. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am being arrested at Greenbrier Park. Please do not stop recording until I'm in the vehicle." "I got you, ma'am," the man said. "I'm not going anywhere." Miller shoved Eleanor forward, forcing her to walk off balance across the uneven grass. This was the perp walk, a tactic designed to humiliate. He marched her past the playground, past the families having picnics, past the elderly couples on benches. He wanted her to feel small. He wanted her to feel the shame of the criminal. But Eleanor Vance did not walk like a criminal. She walked with her head high, her back straight despite the unnatural position of her arms. She looked straight ahead, her face a mask of determined calm. She was already drafting the opening arguments of the lawsuit in her mind. She was cataloging every bruise, every shove, every word Miller spoke. They reached the patrol car parked at the edge of the park. Miller opened the back door and pushed her head down to guide her in. The plastic seat was hard, unforgiving, and smelled of stale sweat and industrial cleaner. As the door slammed shut, sealing her inside the cage, the jazz music back at the bench finally faded from earshot, leaving only the sound of Miller's heavy breathing as he walked around to the driver's side. He got in and started the engine. He didn't look at her in the rearview mirror. He turned on his computer, typing in the initial details of the arrest. "Hope that music was worth it," he said, a smug tone returning to his voice now that he was safely inside his cruiser. Eleanor stared at the back of his head. She didn't answer. She didn't need to engage with him anymore. The time for discussion was over. The legal machinery had already begun to turn, even if he didn't hear the gears grinding yet. She sat in silence as the car pulled out into traffic, the siren chirping once to clear a path. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Miller played the radio talk sports loud. It was another petty power move, another way to assert control over her sensory environment. Eleanor tuned it out. She focused on her breathing. She focused on the pain in her wrists and categorized it as evidence. When they pulled into the sally port of the 4th precinct, the heavy garage door rattled down behind them, plunging the bay into artificial twilight. Miller hauled her out of the car. "Let's go. Booking is this way." Duh. He led her through the heavy steel doors down the linoleum hallway that smelled of floor wax and coffee. They entered the processing area, a large room with a high counter where the desk sergeant sat behind a glass partition. Sergeant Frank Kowalski was 58 years old. He was a dinosaur in the department, a man who had survived 5 different police chiefs and 3 mayors. He had seen everything. He was drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup looking over a duty roster when Miller walked in with his prisoner. "What do we have, Miller?" Kowalski asked without looking up. "Afternoon sweep. Disorderly conduct, failure to obey, refusal to ID." Miller recited the charges, sounding proud of his work. "Refused to turn down loud music in the park, then caused a scene." Kowalski looked up. He looked at Miller. Then he looked at the woman standing behind him in handcuffs. The styrofoam cup dropped from Kowalski's hand. It hit the desk, spilling lukewarm coffee over his paperwork, but he didn't notice. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the filing cabinets with a loud crash. "Oh, dear God," Kowalski whispered. Miller frowned, confused. "Sarge, what's wrong?" Kowalski ignored him. He rushed around the desk, moving faster than he had in years. He came right up to Eleanor, his face pale. Miss Vance, I am so sorry." Eleanor looked at the sergeant. She recognized him. He had testified in a RICO case she handled 5 years ago. A good cop, an honest one. "Hello, Sergeant Kowalski," she said. "I'm afraid your officer here has made a significant error in judgment." Miller looked between them, a cold knot of dread forming in his stomach. "Sarge, you know her." Kowalski turned on Miller, and the look in his eyes was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was the look of a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. "Miller," Kowalski said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Do you have any idea who you just handcuffed?" She refused to ID," Miller stammered. "She was playing music." "This is Eleanor Vance," Kowalski barked. "She is the chief of the criminal division for the U.S. Attorney's Office. She is the highest-ranking federal prosecutor in this district. She signs the indictments that put our guys away when they screw up." The silence that followed was absolute. The background noise of the station phones, ringing radios, chattering, seemed to vanish. Miller stared at Eleanor, the woman in the wool cardigan, the woman reading the book, the woman he had just manhandled through a public park. "Unlock these cuffs," Kowalski ordered. Right now. Miller fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He dropped the keys once, had to pick them up. He stepped behind Eleanor, reaching for her wrists. Stop, Eleanor said. Miller froze. I do not consent to being unhandcuffed yet, Eleanor said. Her voice was calm, but it filled the room. I want the watch commander or the captain to see me exactly as I am. I want the record to reflect that I was brought into this station in restraints. Ms. Vance, please, Kowalski said. Captain Reynolds is at home. It's his day off. Call him, Eleanor said. And while you're at it, call the city attorney and the chief of police. I'll wait. She walked over to the metal bench attached to the wall and sat down. She crossed her legs at the ankles. She looked perfectly comfortable except for the steel cuffs binding her hands behind her back. Miller stood in the middle of the room holding his keys. He looked at Kowalski. Sarge, I didn't know. She didn't tell me. She didn't have to tell you, Kowalski hissed. She told you the law. You arrested a federal prosecutor for reading a book, Miller. You better pray she doesn't decide to destroy you, but knowing her. It's already too late. Captain Reynolds arrived 20 minutes later. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt, having clearly rushed from a family event. He burst through the doors, took one look at Eleanor Vance sitting in handcuffs on the prisoner bench, and closed his eyes in physical pain. Unlock her, Reynolds said to Kowalski. Now. This time, Eleanor allowed it. Kowalski gently unlocked the cuffs. Eleanor rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. She stood up and faced the captain. Eleanor, Reynolds said, there are no words. I am mortified. Captain Reynolds, Eleanor said, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Officer Miller arrested me without probable cause. He fabricated a charge of disorderly conduct because I asserted my Fourth Amendment rights regarding a noise ordinance that I was not violating. He used excessive force during the arrest. He refused to call a supervisor when warned that he was violating federal civil rights statutes. She turned her gaze to Miller, who was standing in the corner looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. I am verbally issuing a preservation order right now, Eleanor continued. I want the body camera footage, the dash cam footage, the booking room audio and video, and the GPS logs from his vehicle. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, if there is a technical glitch, I will bring the full weight of the Department of Justice down on this precinct. Do we understand each other? Absolutely, Reynolds said. Everything will be preserved. You have my word. I also want his disciplinary file, Eleanor said, because an officer doesn't just wake up one morning and decide to violate the Constitution this flagrantly. He has done this before, and I'm going to find every person he's done it to. She picked up her purse, which had been tossed on the counter. I am leaving now. I assume there are no charges. No charges, Reynolds said quickly. None. You are free to go. Good, Eleanor said. You'll be hearing from my lawyer in the morning. And, Captain, get that officer off the street before he costs this city even more money. She walked out of the station. She didn't look back. By the time Eleanor got home, the video was already circulating. The man in the jogging suit had posted it to Twitter. The caption read, PD arrests older black woman reading book in Greenbrier Park. Claims music was too loud. She was chill cop, was crazy. Within 2 hours, the video had 50,000 views. By the next morning, it was on every major news network. The visual was undeniable, a dignified, well-dressed woman being twisted up and handcuffed while calmly citing the law, contrasted with a young, aggressive officer losing his temper. The internet detectives went to work. They identified Eleanor Vance before the police released a statement. When the public realized who she was, the story shifted from another viral arrest to systemic crisis. If a federal prosecutor, a woman with the ultimate insider knowledge of the justice system, could be treated this way, what hope did a regular citizen have? On Tuesday, Eleanor filed the lawsuit. It was not a simple complaint. It was a scorching indictment of the police department's practices. She sued Officer Miller individually and the city for failure to train and supervise. She alleged violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, but she went further. She used her resources to subpoena records of every noise complaint arrest Miller had made in his 4 years. The discovery phase was devastating. Eleanor's team found that Officer Miller had issued 47 citations for noise violations in Greenbrier Park. 45 of them were issued to Black or Hispanic citizens. In the wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood of Oakwood Heights, just 2 miles away, Miller had never issued a single noise citation despite numerous calls to dispatch about loud house parties. The data proved a pattern of selective enforcement. Miller was using the noise ordinance as a pretext, a legal excuse to stop and harass minorities in the park. The city attorney took one look at the data and the deposition of Officer Miller, where Eleanor Vance personally sat in the room staring him down while her lawyer tore his testimony to shreds and waved the white flag. They couldn't go to trial. A jury would destroy them. The settlement was finalized 6 months later. The city paid Eleanor Vance $1.8 million. Officer Kyle Miller was fired for cause, specifically for filing a false police report, conduct unbecoming and civil rights violations. He was stripped of his pension. Because of the nature of his termination, his certification was revoked, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. But Eleanor wasn't done. She took the $1.8 million, every cent of it, and established the Vance Legal Defense Fund. The fund's sole purpose was to provide top-tier legal representation for indigent citizens in that specific city who had been charged with quality of life, crimes, loitering, noise violations, disorderly conduct. She used the city's money to build a permanent shield against the city's own predatory policing. On the 1-year anniversary of the arrest, Eleanor Vance returned to Greenbrier Park. She sat on the same bench. She brought the same Bluetooth speaker. She put on a little Miles Davis, keeping the volume low, respectful, and legal. She sat there for an hour, reading her book. A patrol car drove by slowly. The officer inside saw her. He waved politely and kept driving. Eleanor didn't wave back. She just watched him go, then returned to her reading. This story matters because it forces us to ask a terrifying question. What if Eleanor Vance had been a nurse, or a teacher, or a custodian? What if she hadn't known the specific case law? What if she hadn't had the confidence to command a room full of police officers? She would have been processed. She would have a criminal record. She would have paid a fine she didn't owe just to make the problem go away. Her life would have been derailed by the ego of one man with a badge. We love to see justice served, and watching a corrupt officer lose his career is satisfying. But true justice isn't about one prosecutor winning a lawsuit. True justice is a world where you don't need a law degree to sit on a park bench in peace. What do you think was the $1.8 million settlement enough for the humiliation she endured? And more importantly, do you think this officer would have ever been caught if he hadn't arrested the one woman who could fight back? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe in holding power accountable, share this story. The more we talk about these things, the harder it becomes for them to hide. Stay safe, know your rights, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stand up. Hands behind your back. Now.
Officer, I'm sitting on a public bench. What crime do you believe I committed?
Don't argue with me. I said stand up.
You have no...
The high-definition lens of the park surveillance camera was silently recording, capturing the vibrant greens of the oak trees and the stark contrasting blue of the uniform moving through the frame. Officer Kyle Branning, 27 years old and brimming with the unearned confidence of a man who believed the badge granted him absolute dominion, had no idea that the stopwatch on his career had just started ticking. He had no idea that the older black man sitting on the wrought iron bench tossing crumbs to a gathering of pigeons was not a vagrant, nor a drug dealer, nor a threat to public safety. He was Marcus Thorne, the man who had rewritten the city's use of force policy, the the man who had modernized the Internal Affairs Division and the man who had spent 35 years wearing the very uniform Branning was now disgracing. Marcus Thorne was the retired chief of police, a legend in law enforcement circles, and he was simply enjoying a Tuesday morning in Savannah Park. Before we unravel this infuriating and ultimately satisfying chain of events, I need you to take a second. Scroll down and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, city, state, or country. And if you believe that nobody, absolutely nobody, should be above the law, hit that subscribe button. This story is going to make your blood boil, but trust me, the payoff is worth every second. Marcus Thorne sat with the posture of a man who had spent decades commanding rooms. At 64, his hair was a distinguished salt and pepper, close-cropped and neat. He wore a pressed polo shirt, khaki trousers, and polished loafers. To anyone paying attention, he looked like a grandfather enjoying his retirement. But Officer Branning wasn't paying attention to the man. He was paying attention to his own bias. Branning had been on the force for 3 years, a transfer from a smaller county where complaints about his aggression had been quietly swept under the rug. He was patrolling the park because there had been complaints of undesirables in the area. In Branning's mind, an older black man sitting alone in a park in the middle of a workday fit the description. From the patrol car, Branning watched Marcus. He saw a man reaching into a brown paper bag. To Marcus, it was birdseed. To Branning, looking through a lens of prejudice, it looked like a potential drug transaction waiting to happen, or perhaps loitering with intent. Branning threw the cruiser into park, not in a designated spot, but right on the pedestrian path blocking the walkway. It was a power move, a subtle way of announcing, "I am here and I own this space." He stepped out, adjusting his duty belt, his hand resting instinctively near the grip of his service weapon, a habit Marcus had specifically tried to train out of rookies during his tenure as chief. Marcus didn't flinch as the heavy boots crunched against the gravel. He didn't look up immediately. He had heard the car, heard the door slam, and heard the approach. His police instincts, honed over 3 decades of investigating homicides and corruption, were still sharp. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew the posture of the approaching officer without even turning his head. It was the posture of a hunter stalking prey. Marcus tossed another handful of seeds to the ground, the pigeons fluttering around his polished shoes. He took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, preparing himself. He had hoped for a peaceful morning, but he was prepared for a lesson in civics. "You there!" Branning's voice boomed, shattering the tranquility of the park. "Let me see your hands." Marcus paused. He slowly brushed the crumbs from his hands and placed them openly on his knees, palms up. He turned his head slowly to face the young officer. He saw the name tag Branning and the tense set of the young man's jaw. He saw the lack of cover, the poor positioning, and the aggressive demeanor. "Good morning, officer," Marcus said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried the weight of authority even if Branning was too deaf to hear it. "Is there a problem?" "I said, let me see your hands," Branning repeated, stepping closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "My hands are visible, officer. They are right here on my knees. I am asking you again, is there a problem? Have I committed a crime?" Branning didn't like the tone. He didn't like the vocabulary. People he stopped were supposed to be nervous. They were supposed to stutter, to apologize, to scramble to comply. They weren't supposed to ask calm, rational questions. "We've had reports of drug activity in this park." Branning lied. It was a standard line, a pretext to fish for probable cause. "I need you to stand up and turn around. I'm going to pat you down for my safety." Marcus remained seated. He knew the game. He knew the Fourth Amendment better than he knew the back of his own hand. He had written the department's training module on Terry stops, the legal standard required for a police officer to stop and frisk a citizen. For a Terry stop to be legal, the officer needed reasonable, articulable suspicion that the person was armed and dangerous or currently engaged in criminal activity. Feeding pigeons on a Tuesday morning did not meet that threshold. "Officer Branning," Marcus said, reading the name tag intentionally, "I do not consent to a search. I am sitting in a public park. I am not impeding traffic. I am not disturbing the peace. Unless you can articulate a specific crime you suspect me of committing, I am under no obligation to stand up or submit to a search." Branning's face flushed a deep, angry red. The use of the word articulate triggered something in him. It was a lawyer word. He hated lawyers. He hated anyone who thought they knew the law better than the person with the gun and the badge. "I don't need a lecture from you, pal." Branning snapped his hand, tightening on his holster. "I am conducting an investigation. Now for the last time, stand up and give me your ID." "I am not required to provide identification unless I am being detained for a suspected crime," Marcus replied, his voice steady, his heartbeat slow. He was using verbal judo, a de-escalation technique he had championed for the entire force years ago. "Am I being detained, officer, or am I free to go?" "You're detained," Branning barked. "For what crime? Loitering, disorderly conduct, failing to obey a lawful order. Take your pick." Marcus almost smiled. It was a tragic comedy. "Loitering requires that I be blocking a right-of-way or soliciting illicit business. I am sitting on a bench installed by the Parks Department for the express purpose of sitting. Disorderly conduct requires behavior that causes public alarm. The only person causing alarm here is you, officer, by shouting at a senior citizen, and an order is only lawful if it is based on a valid legal foundation. You have none." Branning was vibrating with rage now. He felt humiliated. He looked around. The park wasn't empty. A few joggers had slowed down. A woman walking her golden retriever had stopped about 30 feet away. She had her phone out. The lens was pointed directly at them. The audience was gathering, and Branning felt the pressure to assert his dominance. He couldn't just walk away now. If he walked away, he lost. In his warped view of policing, it was a zero-sum game. "You want to play sea lawyer?" Branning sneered, stepping within 2 feet of Marcus. "I can make your day very difficult. I can tow your car. I can bring you in for obstruction. You really want to go down this road over an ID card?" "It is not about the ID card, Officer Branning," Marcus said softly. "It is about the Constitution. It is about the oath you swore. You swore to uphold the law, not to harass citizens because you are bored or biased. I am giving you a chance to walk away. You can get back in your car, you can continue your patrol, and we can pretend this violation of my civil rights never happened. I strongly suggest you take that option." It was a lifeline. Marcus was offering him a way out, a chance to save his career before he destroyed it. But Branning didn't hear a lifeline. He heard a threat. He heard an older black man telling him what to do, and his ego couldn't handle the inversion of the hierarchy he believed in. "That's it," Branning said, pulling his radio mic from his shoulder. "Dispatch show me 10:15 with one male subject at Savannah Park, resisting." "I am not resisting," Marcus stated clearly, raising his voice slightly so the woman recording could hear. "I am asserting my rights. There is a difference, officer. A very expensive difference." Branning didn't care. He reached for his handcuffs. The atmosphere in the park had shifted from idyllic to volatile. The woman with the phone was now narrating her voice, trembling but determined. "He's bothering that man for no reason," she said to her live stream. "The man is just sitting there." More people were stopping. A delivery driver pulled his truck over to watch. Branning moved to grab Marcus's wrist. Marcus didn't pull away, but he didn't help either. He went limp, a passive resistance that forced Branning to exert more effort. "Stand up!" Branning yelled, yanking on Marcus's arm. Marcus rose slowly, protecting his joints. He was 64, and while he was in good shape, he wasn't looking for a rotator cuff injury. "I am complying under duress," Marcus announced to the witnesses. "I am being seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment. This officer has failed to articulate reasonable suspicion. Everyone watching, please take note." "Shut up," Branning hissed, spinning Marcus around and shoving him toward the bench. "Spread your legs." "You are making a mistake," Marcus said, his face pressed against the cool morning air, looking at the grass. A mistake that will end your career. The only mistake I made was not dragging you in sooner, Branning retorted. He kicked Marcus's ankles apart harder than necessary. He began a rough pat-down, his hands moving aggressively over Marcus's pockets. He felt the wallet in the back pocket. "Is this a weapon?" Branning asked sarcastically, tapping the wallet. "That is my wallet," Marcus said. "Inside that wallet you will find my driver's license. Next to my driver's license you will find my retired credentials. I served 35 years in this department. I was the chief of police for the last 12. If you open that wallet you will see exactly who you are manhandling." Branning paused. For a split second, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. The man spoke with too much confidence. He knew too much procedure. But the doubt was quickly drowned out by adrenaline and cognitive dissonance. No way, Branning thought. A retired chief wouldn't be sitting here in a park. He's lying. He's trying to scare me. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner." Branning scoffed. He didn't pull the wallet out. He didn't check. He didn't want to check. If he checked, and the man was telling the truth, Branning was terrified of what that meant. So he chose willful ignorance. He chose to push forward, believing that once he had the man in a cell, he could figure out a way to spin the narrative. He could charge him with something heavy enough to force a plea deal. That's how it worked. That's how he had been taught by the older, cynical officers on his shift. "You have a chance to look," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. "Look at the ID, son. Don't throw your life away." "I'm done listening to you," Branning snapped. He grabbed the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic ratchet sound echoed in the quiet park. Click, click. The cold steel bit into Marcus's wrists. It was a sensation he hadn't felt in decades, not since he was a rookie acting as a decoy in sting operations. It was degrading. It was painful, and it was infuriating. But Marcus kept his face a mask of stone. He wasn't just a victim now. He was evidence. Every bruise, every insult, every tightened notch on the cuffs was building a case that would ensure this man never carried a badge again. "You are under arrest," Branning recited, "for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct." "I understand," Marcus said. "I would like you to note the time. 10 to 14 a.m. You have arrested a retired chief of police without probable cause. You have ignored exculpatory evidence in my back pocket. You are proceeding with a false arrest." Branning shoved Marcus forward, marching him toward the patrol car, the walk of shame. But Marcus walked with his head high. He made eye contact with the woman filming. He nodded to her. "Keep rolling," the nod said. "Don't stop." Branning opened the back door of the cruiser and pushed Marcus inside. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving. The cage was cramped. The car smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, a scent Marcus knew intimately. He had approved the purchase order for those specific plastic seats 10 years ago. He had signed the checks for the fleet maintenance. The irony was palpable. Branning slammed the door, sealing Marcus in. The young officer walked around to the driver's side, puffing out his chest, glaring at the small crowd that had gathered. "Show's over," he yelled. "Move along unless you want to join him." He got in the front seat, his breathing heavy. He picked up the radio. "Dispatch 1015, one male in custody, en route to Central." Central. The 1st Precinct. Marcus's old home base. He had designed the layout of the intake center. He knew the shift commanders. He knew the desk sergeants. He knew the custodial staff. The ride to the station was only 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Branning didn't speak. He turned up the radio, blasting talk radio to drown out the silence. He was trying to pump himself up, trying to convince himself he had done the right thing. He didn't listen, Branning told himself. He failed the attitude test. You can't let people walk all over you. In the back seat, Marcus closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. He was memorizing. He was replaying every word Branning had said, every action he had taken. He was preparing his statement. He felt the cuffs digging into his wrists. Branning hadn't double-locked them, meaning they were tightening with every bump in the road. Another violation of procedure. Another point for the lawsuit. They pulled into the sally port of the first precinct. The heavy garage doors rolled down behind them, sealing them in the concrete belly of the station. Branning got out and opened the back door. "Let's go," he muttered, grabbing Marcus by the upper arm. They walked through the secure hallway past the holding cells where men banged on the glass. Marcus looked at them, young men mostly black and Latino, and wondered how many of them were there because of officers like Branning. How many careers had been ruined, how many families shattered because of an ego with a badge. They reached the booking desk. It was a high counter separated by reinforced glass. Behind the desk sat Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was 55, a career sergeant who had no desire to climb the ladder. He was good at his job, fair and observant. He had served under Marcus for 20 years. They had played poker together at the Benevolent Association fundraisers. Miller had been at Marcus's retirement party 2 years ago. He had given a toast. Branning shoved Marcus toward the counter. "Got a 10-15 for you, Sarge. Obstruction, disorderly, refused to ID. Real piece of work. Thought he was a lawyer." Sergeant Miller was looking down at paperwork. "All right, Branning, put him on the bench. Let's get the property." "He wouldn't give me his ID," Branning bragged, pulling the wallet out of Marcus's back pocket himself now. "Let's see who this guy really is." Miller looked up, bored, ready to process another number. Then his eyes locked onto the man standing in handcuffs. The color drained from Miller's face so fast it looked like he had been slapped. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Chief," Miller whispered. Branning paused, holding the wallet. "What?" Miller didn't look at Branning. He was staring at Marcus Thorne. "Chief Thorne Marcus." "Hello, Sergeant Miller," Marcus said calmly. "I apologize for the disturbance. Officer Branning here seems to be under the impression that feeding birds is a felony." The silence that descended on the booking room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the lungs of everyone present. Other officers who had been chatting near the coffee machine stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned to the trio at the desk. Branning looked at Miller, then at the man he had handcuffed, then down at the wallet in his hand. His fingers fumbled as he flipped it open. There, sitting behind the plastic window, was the driver's license Marcus L. Thorne. And right next to it, the gold shield. The heavy, unmistakable badge of the Chief of Police retired, encased in leather with the inscription, 35 years of service. Branning felt his stomach drop through the floor. It was a physical sensation of nausea, a cold sweat breaking out instantly on his forehead. He looked up, and for the first time he really saw the man. He recognized the face now. He had seen it in the academy. He had seen the portrait hanging in the hallway of the very building they were standing in. He had arrested the man whose picture he walked past every single day. I... Branning stammered. His voice was a squeak. Sergeant Miller wasn't stammering. He was moving. He vaulted from behind the desk, bypassing the secure door, and rushed into the booking area. "Unlock him!" Miller barked at Branning. It wasn't a request. It was a command filled with fury. "Unlock him right now!" Branning's hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the key into the handcuffs. He stabbed at the keyhole, missing twice. "Give me the keys!" Miller snatched them from Branning's trembling hand. He quickly and gently unlocked the cuffs. "Chief, I am so sorry. I don't know. I have no idea what this idiot was thinking." Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had bitten into his skin. He looked at Branning, who was now backed against the wall, looking like a child who had broken an expensive vase. "He wasn't thinking, Sergeant," Marcus said, his voice icy. "That is the problem. He was feeling. He was feeling powerful. He was feeling biased. But he was not thinking." At that moment, the door to the watch commander's office flew open. Captain Reynolds, a man who owed his promotion to Marcus Thorne, stepped out, drawn by the commotion. He saw the scene, his retired boss rubbing his wrists, a terrified rookie cowering against the wall, and the desk sergeant looking apoplectic. "Marcus," Reynolds asked, confused. "What the hell is going on?" "Captain Reynolds," Marcus said, shifting instantly back into command mode. "I have been unlawfully detained, arrested without probable cause, and subjected to excessive force by Officer Branning. I want a complaint number generated immediately. I want this officer's body camera footage pulled and secured on a separate server before it suffers a technical malfunction. I want the dash cam footage secured, and I want the dispatch logs from 10:00 a.m. to present printed out." Reynolds looked at Branning. The look was withering. It was a look that promised pain. "Branning," Reynolds said, his voice dangerously low. "My office, now. Gun and badge on the desk." "Captain, I didn't know," Branning pleaded. "You didn't know the law," Marcus interjected. "Or you didn't know I was someone who could hold you accountable, because if I was just a regular citizen, a janitor, a teacher, a bus driver, you would be processing me right now, wouldn't you? You would be writing up false charges to cover your tracks." Branning had no answer. He hung his head. "Get out of my sight!" Reynolds roared. Branning scurried into the office. Reynolds turned back to Marcus. "Marcus, come sit down. Can I get you water? Coffee? Do you need a medic?" "I don't need water, David," Marcus said, using the captain's first name. "I need a photographer. I want photos of these wrists while the marks are fresh, and I need my phone. I have a call to make." Miller handed Marcus his property bag. Marcus took out his phone. He didn't call his wife. He didn't call a friend. He called the best civil rights attorney in the state, a woman named Elena Ross, who had sued the department 6 times while Marcus was chief. They had been adversaries then. They were about to be a devastating team now. "Elena," Marcus said when she answered. "It's Marcus Thorne." "Yes, the retired chief. I'm at the 1st Precinct." "No, I'm not visiting. I've just been arrested for feeding pigeons." "Yes, you heard me right. Yes, I'm ready to burn it down." While Marcus waited for his lawyer, the precinct went into damage control mode. But it was too late. The woman in the park hadn't just recorded the video. She had live-streamed it. It was already on Twitter. It was on Facebook. The headline was catchy: "Savannah Park Police Arrest Retired Chief for Sitting on Bench." By the time Elena arrived, the video had 50,000 views. By the time Marcus walked out of the precinct an hour later, no charges filed. Obviously, it had 500,000. Branning was suspended pending investigation before the end of the shift. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with a suspension. As he stood on the steps of the precinct, the microphones of local news crews thrust in his face, he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a crusader. "The question," Marcus told the reporters, "is not why Officer Branning arrested me. We know why. He arrested me because he saw a black man he didn't respect and decided to teach him a lesson. The question is, how many other people has he done this to? How many people are sitting in jail right now because they didn't have a gold shield in their back pocket? That is what we are going to find out." The investigation that followed was scorched earth, because Marcus knew exactly where the bodies were buried. He knew the codes for the internal files. He knew how to read the patrol logs. He guided his legal team with surgical precision. The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed a pattern that was nauseating. Officer Branning had been on the force for 36 months. In that time, he had made 112 suspicious person stops. 98 of them were black men. 80 of them were over the age of 50. He had a type. He liked targets he thought wouldn't fight back older men who might be intimidated by his aggression. There were complaints in his file, 6 of them. Rude, aggressive, unlawful search. Every single one had been marked unsubstantiated by his previous supervisor. That supervisor was now named in the lawsuit as well. The body camera footage was released to the public 2 weeks later. It was damning. The audio was crisp. The world heard Branning refuse to articulate a crime. They heard Marcus calmly citing the law. They heard the clack-clack of the handcuffs. Commentators on cable news dissected the video. "This is what we've been saying," a pundit argued. "If this can happen to a police chief, what hope does a regular guy have?" The police union, usually quick to defend officers, was silent. They couldn't defend this, not against one of their own legends. They cut Branning loose. They announced they would not be funding his legal defense. Marcus didn't stop at Branning. His lawsuit targeted the training protocols, the oversight committee, and the disciplinary review board. He argued that the department had failed to supervise Branning, that they had ignored the red flags. The city attorney looked at the evidence, looked at the public outcry, and looked at the plaintiff. "We can't win this," she told the mayor. "Thorne will destroy us on the stand. He knows our playbook better than we do." "Settle it," the mayor said. But Marcus didn't want a quick check. He held out for 6 months. He dragged them through depositions. He made Branning sit in a chair and answer questions under oath for 8 hours. He forced Branning to admit on the record that he had no reasonable suspicion. He forced him to admit he was angry that Marcus hadn't been afraid of him. Only after the department agreed to a consent decree, a legally binding agreement to implement a new independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, did Marcus agree to talk numbers. The settlement was finalized on a rainy Thursday in November. The city agreed to pay Marcus Thorne $850,000. They also agreed to the structural reforms he demanded. Kyle Branning was fired, stripped of his certification, and barred from ever holding a law enforcement job in the state again. Marcus took the check. He didn't buy a boat. He didn't buy a vacation home. He deposited the entire amount into a newly formed trust, the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. Its mission was to provide top-tier legal representation for indigent citizens who had been victims of false arrest. A week later, the sun was shining again. It was a crisp, clear morning in Savannah Park. Marcus Thorne walked along the gravel path. He wore a heavy wool coat and a scarf. He carried a brown paper bag. He approached the same wrought iron bench where his life had changed months ago. He sat down. He reached into the bag and pulled out a handful of birdseed. He tossed it onto the ground. The pigeons, creatures of habit, descended in a flurry of gray and white. They didn't know he was a hero. They didn't know he was a millionaire. They didn't know he had just forced an entire police department to change its soul. To them, he was just the man with the food. Marcus watched them, his expression somber. He felt the weight of the victory, but it was a heavy weight. He thought about the fear in Branning's eyes, not the fear of doing wrong, but the fear of consequences. He thought about how fragile justice really was. If he had left his wallet at home that day, if he had been anyone else, the story would have ended in a cell. He took a deep breath, listening to the wind in the oaks. He was free, but he knew the work wasn't done. It would never be done. Thank you for reading this story. It's a stark reminder that authority without accountability is just tyranny. Marcus Thorne had the tools to fight back, but so many others don't. I have a question for you. Do you think the $850,000 settlement was enough? Or should the officer have faced criminal charges like kidnapping or assault? And have you ever been in a situation where you had to use your knowledge of the law to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories and opinions matter. And if you want to support this channel and see more stories where justice is actually served, please like this video and subscribe. We have a lot more truth to uncover together. Stay safe out there.